Hello, everybody. I'm Zenith, and welcome back to the Disney Debate, where Kat Mac and I talk about Disney products and Disney in general. Guess what, guys? I am finally on a new computer. Yay!
Yay!
So you may notice a bit of quality difference in terms of the microphone, in terms of the actual internet speeds. And so things will be done a lot faster around here. And it's very good timing on the fact that we are now in the 1950s. And so we're entering the golden age of Disney.
Yep.
But enough about that. How's it going, Kat?
Going pretty good. I mean, I don't have a brand new shiny computer like you do, but I get by.
I needed one. It was taking me 3 hours to render these files.
Ugh. Yeah, I hear that. But other than that, I'm doing pretty good, and I'm really excited because I got to watch Cinderella. It's one of my favorite movies. And
Cinderella is a timeless classic. It is one of those films that you see as a kid and you're entertained.
Mm-hmm.
I saw it with you a couple days ago, and I was just glued to the screen. This is one of those films where everything simply works about it. And I don't say that about a lot of Disney films, but this is a lot of there's not really any major problems with this.
yeah, nothing major. I mean, there's still a few annoyances, sort of because of the times and sort of because of lack of character development on certain characters, but for the most part, these complaints are minor, and it doesn't really distract from, the full impact of the story.
In my opinion, Cinderella is kind of a spiritual successor to Snow White, in the way that Snow White launched Disney's career, and Cinderella takes so much lessons from the way Snow White was produced. It creates a lot of similarities in terms of story structure, in terms of the way certain characters are in the film. And I mean, it's both about princesses, both about little animals helping the main character, and the side characters get a lot of focus, a lot more than the main character at times. And in that way, it definitely feels like they took Snow White and said, we can make this better. And so 10 years later, they made Cinderella, and it really shows the quality of Disney in terms of how they're able to take something that they created before that wasn't bad, but make it 10 times better.
Yeah, it even says on the movie poster, greatest since Snow White. And it is so true. I mean, Snow White I still have deep sentiments for, but in this case Cinderella just did everything right.
I think Cinderella took certain strides in terms of plot structure. It reworked it and took out a lot of the fluff that Snow White had, and there is some fluff pieces in the film, but it actually makes it important to the actual film at large.
Mm-hmm.
And the villain is much better than Snow White, in my opinion. The villain does a tremendous job in terms of subtlety. The lighting in this film is much better used than in any of the Disney films to date. There's just a lot of things that were updated to make this film better than any film that Disney had produced before. Now, for my money, Bambi and Fantasia are still a bit better, but after all the package films that we'd had until this point, this is such a breath of fresh air. I mean, we start off 1950 with a full animated feature film, and it's almost like they're recreating the Disney Corporation.
Yep, so whole new reboot. All brand new technology, brand new structure, new animation, and it is glorious.
And before we get into the characters, talking about the animation a little bit more, the way they made this was, in order to cut costs, in order to make this feasible, 90% of this was done in live action before it was ever animated. And this is something that Disney didn't want to do, but in order to make this work, they actually had to use this technique. And I really think it works. I mean, it's not sloppy animation. It's not like something where it's not like The Reluctant Dragon.
Thank God.
It's not as bad as the So Dear to My Heart animation and the small bits. It's just it works as a solid Disney animated release, and it's not going to be anything spectacular at this time, but for what they could do for their cost-cutting measures, this is simply pretty damn good.
I agree and disagree, because I like the fact that they started using live-action models, because up to that point I think they mostly used animals, since a lot of the films they did was about animals. But I think they really utilized the live action well, because the movement of the characters does seem realistic and fluent. The only criticism I have is that when you compare the live action structure to the really cartoony animation, like on the mice, it gets a bit, it seems a bit weird.
It doesn't exactly mesh, and I mean, Disney has always been good at animated. Disney has always been very good at animating like critters and animals and stuff like that, and so you see in films like Pinocchio, like the movements on those, the characters in there really well done. And with this, they had already mastered the animation of animals. Now they were trying to make it cost-effective and animate humans more realistically. And I think that this animation does it justice, but I still don't think it's better than some of the stuff they had put out in the 1940s, back when they actually had the money to hire a lot of animators, and they had the budget to animate lots of things on the screen at once.
Yeah, plus a big downside with trying to do, like, rotoscoping or, like, making realistic people is that when you try to put it into a cartoon setting, like, you have to kind of, like, really make the humans, like, not as goofy and less, rubbery, like, more solid. And it just, it kind of breaks the flow sometimes. And not only that, but, like, certain aspects of the characters, tend to get a bit, what's the term? A little washed up. Like, for instance, there are times where Cinderella's nose, like, disappears, or the fact that she has Barbie feet.
That may be where Rob Liefeld got his inspiration from.
Yeah, well, yeah, she does have really tiny feet.
But overall, I'd say the animation is very good, especially because coming off of the dark ages of the 1940s and coming off the war, doing this with the budget that they had at the time is pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm. Especially the transformation scenes, everything that involves magic.
Yeah, the Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo scene where she transforms the coach and everything together. Just compare that to Pinocchio, where they had to like use glitter and just make the thing appear. Here, everything is animated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you see Cinderella as her dress magically appears on her, and you see the characters as the animals transform to human, and it is really pretty. And not only that, but the background scenery for everything is really good too. Just, the scale, like it was mentioned, like the scale of certain things is really impressive. Like, even the chateau in which Cinderella lives in is made out to be a lot bigger than it probably is.
Mm-hmm. And just when you actually look at the size of the castle when everyone's entering with the coaches, we see the scale of the coaches, and then we see the scale of the castle. It is enormous. And I think that's why the castle has been the symbol of Disney for such a long time. Like, you see this castle, and this is like a symbol of like power, and it has this weight to it. It has this like presence that this castle has.
Hmm. Although it's always weird that they call down in Disney World, they always call the castle there Cinderella's castle, when, in my opinion, it actually resembles more of Sleeping Beauty's castle over in Disneyland.
The thing is, I think they modeled the Disney logo after Cinderella's castle, like the castle in Cinderella. And I don't know too much about the castle in Disney World, about how it was modeled or whatnot, but Sleeping Beauty didn't come out till a little bit later.
Yeah, but her castle was the first one made.
That's true.
Okay, so should we move on to the characters?
Yes, we shall. I've talked enough about animation for a while. So obviously the first character to talk about is Cinderella herself. And I have to say, she is a much better and much well-rounded character than Snow White was.
Yeah, a lot better. It's like they took Snow White and then, made her more realistic and actually gave her a little more personality. Now, that goes without saying, like, Cinderella, she's still really nice, sort of like Snow White was. But in this, she's treated a lot worse by the people around her.
Mm-hmm.
And even though it's obvious she's not happy with her life, but she still makes the best of it. So she still has that really princess quality where, she's nice and sweet in every way, even if she is being treated like crap.
And the thing is, she's a very strong person. Despite her situation, she's able to keep her head held high and keep her dreams. And she doesn't approach her stepmother. How do I put this?
Subserviently.
Yeah, she's not completely subservient to her stepmother. I mean, she does somewhat talk back to her. She does keep her head held high. And she has the courage, when the ball comes up, to ask her stepmother, "Can I go?" I mean, it's a royal decree. I found a loophole in your logic.
Yeah, so she is smart, and she actually is a bit witty too, in terms of her humor, because she does poke a little fun, at the fact that her stepsisters are so demanding and, obviously not that talented music-wise.
Mm-hmm. I mean, she's very headstrong, and she's able to make the best of things during the worst of times. Like, there's a scene where she has to, like, wash the entire floors, and she just sings a song just to keep her mind off of her chores.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, she's definitely, a more realistic princess, in my opinion. In the fact that, she has more personality, she has more development, is given, like, a lot more, like, personal traits. So, as far as the second princess goes, like, I know a lot of people rate her pretty low in the fact that, again, she's just a generally nice person that happened to be in a bad situation, but she still, is, one of the more popular princesses for a reason.
The thing about her is, a lot of the princesses I look to, and I can't really see, they're kind of a blank slate to me. Snow White and Alice, they're blank slates.
About. Like, I have my arguments for either one, but still, I do agree Cinderella does kind of overshadow both of them a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So, and, and plus there is a few, like, negative traits about her, like, as I was sort of, like, poking fun at while I was watching this, is the fact that, well, one thing I noticed is that she's a bit of a hypocrite. Like, I say this because the scene I saw at the beginning, where she wakes up and she's saying that, like, oh, everyone orders me around, but they can't order me to stop dreaming. And then, like, 5 minutes later, when she goes down to the kitchen to feed the cat and the dog, and she sees that the dog is, dreaming about catching the cat, she's like, oh, you better get rid of those dreams. And it's like, bitch, who the fuck are you talking to? You just said that, hey, they can't stop me from dreaming. Why are you telling your dog to stop dreaming?
It's a bit of kind of a cruel irony in the fact that he's a dog and kind of, not allowed to be in the house, and the fact that he kind of has a lot of similarities to Cinderella.
Mm-hmm. And also, I wouldn't say that, Cinderella just, waited around for her prince to come. Because, I mean, she tried her best to go to the ball, by completing all of her chores on time and everything. But again, she did have, that extra help.
She basically did all that was in her power for women at that time and for a person in her situation to be able to go to the ball and have her dreams come true. And when that didn't work out, then the fairy appeared. And that's the thing that this film does right, is that, in Snow White, it just kind of she just gets handed a lot of things at the end. Like, the prince just comes and kisses her, and it's just like, oh, I'm the new character now. But here, she actively seeks to go to a ball because it's her wish to actually be with normal people and just have fun. And she meets someone that she falls in love with.
Yeah, but she did get handed a lot of stuff. I mean, it's very similar to Snow White in that, yes, she was made into basically a servant, but at the same time, her beauty could not hide the fact that she was, a servant girl, and also that despite that, she was still able to meet a dashing prince and win his heart, and then have, these little side characters who would go out of their way to help her no matter what. And then, Deus Ex Machina comes in and they both manage to get the love of their life.
Like I said, it's basically Snow White, but done better. And, a lot of the problems in Snow White do reoccur, but the way they're told, the way they're presented in Cinderella is better. It's much better, and it works, it flows together much better than Snow White.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah, I do agree. At least it's fun, to watch, how she gets from point A to point B. And strangely enough, this takes place over the course of, 2 days?
Yeah, it's actually, it's pretty much 2 days. We get to see Cinderella for the first day. We get to know her, we get to know the mice, and we get to know the other characters. And that's the biggest thing I love about the structure of this film, is that for, I'd say, the first 20 minutes, we're just getting to know the characters.
Yeah, and it's character development. Oh my god.
Yeah, there's a lot of really good character development where he starts up, Cinderella wakes up, and then the mice come in, and then she goes down and she meets up with the dog and the cat, and we get to see them, and then we see the chickens and whatnot, and then we hear the sisters and the mother calling for her, and so she goes to serve on them. It all progresses very naturally, like it would in a normal situation, a normal day, and it gets us acclimated to these characters. One thing about Snow White is that these characters kind of came out of nowhere. With the huntsman, he had really no build up to him, and then he was just out of the picture. Same thing with the prince. Same thing kind of with the queen, because, we get a little bit of backstory on her, but we never really get to truly know her or why she wanted to be the fairest in the land, other than she was jealous. And here we get to know each and every one of these characters for the first half of the film, and then when things do happen, when the ball actually occurs, we root for these characters. When the mice get attacked, we root for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this film actually does, despite the fact it only takes place over 2 days, it actually does take its time. So, you actually grow an attachment, and, in the case of the villains, a resentment for each of the characters, and, it doesn't seem, some parts may seem like it drags, but, in my opinion, it's, the fun. Basically just, the fun of watching the characters, do what they do on a normal daily basis.
And honestly, in terms of padding, in terms of like, seeing the mice have fun and stuff like that, it is much better than seeing a scene of grown men learning how to wash their hands.
Yes, much better.
Like I still don't understand why that was in the film, but I think that these characters are so much better utilized in this, and the fact that you know them and you've learned about them makes these padding scenes much more fun. Now let's get to the second really big character of the film, although he isn't really in it for a large portion, and that's the prince.
Bland, bland, bland.
Now, in his defense, he is better than the prince in Snow White.
I don't agree. I kind of rate them about the same.
I mean, I think first of all they have better singing voices. I think everyone has a better singing voice in Cinderella. The voice actress for Cinderella herself, Eileen Woods, she's amazing. She's really good, and the prince does a great job too. I think there's much more chemistry here between the prince and between Cinderella, and now we still don't get too much interaction between them. However, when they do dance at the ball, I get the impression that something happens. Like, you see someone across the way, and he sees her, and like he's struck by someone. And she is kind of different. She's never been to any of these balls before. He must be wondering like who she is. And during their dance sequence, he falls in love with her. Now, there still isn't too much to this prince, but I kind of get behind his motivations a lot more than I do in The Prince and Snow White, who is just like, oh, hey, I'm a prince. What's up? Let's get married.
Nah, I still feel the same way, because like the prince in Snow White, he shows up for, that one scene, then you never see him again until the very end, and he's just there to whisk Cinderella away to her happy ending. Just because he, barely talks, too. And the whole thing is that, the whole big driving point is the fact that this ball is being held because his father, wants to live to see his grandkids before he passes. But unfortunately, the prince has shown really no interest in getting married, so this is sort of like a push in that direction. And, again...
One thing I did like about this approach, though, is that when the prince's father is talking to the duke and he's saying, like, oh, it's not going to happen like this, it's not going to happen, and he narrates, like, how like, the fairy tale-esque sequence of how things would happen as the prince is going through these actions, which I thought was it was nice juxtaposition where we see the prince, like, looking up, and the duke is narrating all of it.
Well, that part I liked, that did fit in really well. It's just that I think that scene at the beginning where his father, the king, is talking about, getting him someone to marry, I think it would have been better if they took the duke out of that scene and put the prince in. That way we can learn, why the prince wasn't interested in, finding someone to marry and, having conversations with his father, who's explaining that, hey, I want to see my grandkids before I pass, and, this whole thing until he's like, okay, fine, throw the ball, but, I'm not gonna, find a woman just because you say so. That would have added some actual character to him. That would have, explained his motivations. Instead, he's just there, to drive the plot.
Yeah, but then again, these films are more about the princesses than the prince. Yes, it would be good to see actual character development from both parties, but I do get the feeling that this is mostly told from Cinderella's point of view. Mostly, other than the scenes, from the Duke and the King. But, with that being said, it makes a lot more sense to showcase more from Cinderella's side and how she views things during the ball. It still would be nice to see a little bit more from the prince, but I'm just saying, back then, they probably didn't have enough time to really give the prince development if they were going to just talk about Cinderella mostly.
Well, once again, like in Snow White, there were going to be scenes and, plot points that involved the prince and showed him a lot more, giving him more character development. In this case, they were going to actually open the movie with him, hunting a deer, but then it was revealed that the deer he was hunting was actually a friend of his, revealing that he has, a relationship with animals the same way that Cinderella does.
Mm-hmm.
Thus, showing that they have something in common. But no, they cut it. And while it's true, in hindsight, it was probably a good idea because probably wouldn't matter later on. It still would have, added something to the prince.
Yeah, I do wish that the prince got more development, but I mean, unfortunately, it couldn't have been done at the time.
Yeah, it's a shame. Add him to the generic Prince Charming pile.
And that's one more to our Disney Prince count and Disney Princess count. So what are we at? 2 for each side?
Yep, just about.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, no, we're up to 3 Disney princes.
3 Disney princes, yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm. So our count continues to grow, and this is the 1950s where the Disney princess was in full bloom, so we're going to have a lot more in that count very soon.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the next characters to talk about, probably one of the most important characters in the film, is the mice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, now, these mice, in my opinion, are they rate among the top, most useful sidekick characters. Because these mice do everything.
And I mean, it's a lot of it is they're repaying her for her kindness. She gives them clothes, she gives them food, and she allows them to live in her room with her and she saves them from traps and mice traps and stuff like that. So she's done a lot of kindness towards them, and so in return, they help her when she's in trouble. And you really get this camaraderie, especially from the very beginning of the film, where she wakes up and all of these mice come to greet her, and they're just like, "Oh, thank you for everything."
Mhm. Yeah, and strangely enough, they also wear clothes, because apparently Cinderella's hobby on the side is that she makes tiny little clothes for her little animal friends, because apparently they need them.
But they don't need pants. Why do people in Disney movies never wear pants? Was Disney against pants?
I guess because it's hard to animate.
Because pants are for squares?
Yeah. That's another thing that, always confused me, though, and I think it actually originated in this movie, at least from what I can remember anyway, is the fact that the mice are the only anthropomorphic characters in this whole movie, despite the fact that there are other animals. They can talk, they're intelligent, they stand upright, they have human features, they move like humans, and basically are humans except in mouse form. Yet, despite that fact, all the other animals in the film, like the bluebirds, the dog, the cat, the horse, all of them are like normal animals. And that never made sense to me.
Yeah, it doesn't really make sense, but then again, this is Disney.
Yeah, it's strange because they do that a lot more often in future movies, like The Rescuers.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always the bigger animals always tend to because none of the other animals can ever talk, especially the bigger ones. And it's what is the smaller you are, the more intelligent you are, but then why are the humans talking? And
logic. There is logic in what she says.
Yeah, but despite that, like I said, the mice are very useful. There are times where especially the new mouse, Gus. Gets into trouble, and it causes Cinderella to get into trouble. Other than that, the stuff that they go through for her is quite astonishing. Because they're able to distract the cat when they need to, able to get their own food. They make a friggin' dress for Cinderella.
And the thing is, like, this really the amount of stuff that they do for Cinderella increases the respect that you have for her as a character, because they're only doing this because they love her, and we've seen a few scenes of them interacting in the beginning, and we know that she's a nice person, she's very nice to them, but through their actions, we get the implications that she's been really incredibly nice to these people for a long time.
Hmm. Yeah, and yeah, like I said, the mice themselves are very nice. The two main ones is Jock and Gus. And Jock is sort of like the leader of the mice. He knows how to get around the cat Lucifer. He knows how to get this and that. He knows every single secret passageway in that entire mansion.
And there are dozens of secret passageways. There's so many different, like, entrances that I'm just like, how do these people not notice that there are so many mouse holes in their house?
Yeah, I mean, the stuff that they pop out of is, like, really creative. Like, they pop out of, aside from mouse holes, there's also, like, little notches in like, the stairwell. There's, holes in the candle holders. And, yeah, there's just a bunch of, like, little places. And, like, I always wanted to be, like, a little mouse and just, go through it like a maze because it seemed like fun.
So the mice, Jacques is like the leader. He directs every one of the other mice, and he's kind of the funny guy. He's the guy who makes all the jokes and laughs at the cat and stuff like that. He's very daring and very he's the most fun of the mice. And then there's Gus, who is the new guy, and he's kind of absent-minded. He kind of makes mistakes sometimes, but he really means well, and you get that from him.
I think he forgets that he's a mouse half the time, though.
Yeah.
Like, he is willing to, like, take on the cat head on, even though it's obvious the thing would kill him in one swipe.
But him and Jack are they're really well suited for each other.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're nice juxtapositions where we have this like extreme leaderly fellow and this somewhat kind of cowardly mouse. And when Jack is very daring, Gus gets this inspiration to be daring himself.
Yeah. And in a way, Gus kind of reminds me of Scrappy Doo.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that he's small, but he wants to, like, do so much, and he wants to be so badass, but he just can't. But he does manage to, like, be useful, though.
Yeah, I mean, but him and Jack do a lot of the work. I mean, not really too much in terms of making the dress. I mean, they cut out the patterns and stuff like that. But they actually get the materials from the cat, and they're able to, get the key to free Cinderella at the end of the movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think the ending would have happened if it wasn't for them.
And so when we get these scenes of just the mice interacting with each other and like them making the dress, and Cinderella doesn't appear for quite a while in these scenes. Like, there are 10-minute scenes where Cinderella isn't on screen, and yet these really work because you understand that this is all about helping Cinderella. Aside from the first scene with the mice, the other scenes are about them helping Cinderella and, helping her get to the ball.
Mm-hmm. Actually, there's one thing I always wondered, though, in terms of their voices. Because I figured that with a lot of the mice, they'd have to speed up their voices, sort of like what they did with Alvin and the Chipmunks. But the weird thing is that with Jock and Gus, it almost seems like, their voices are actually done naturally. Just probably like a bit sped up and, probably a little more strain on the vocal cords.
Or on helium.
That too. But, like, they don't sound as high as, like, the other mice do, particularly the female mice. But the way they talk, it just seems sort of natural, and it's weird. And the dialect that they talk, the way that they talk it's kind of cute. the way that they call Cinderella Cinderella.
And they call Lucifer Lucifer.
Yeah. Like, I never understand why they did that, but I always thought it was cute.
I think it was more like it was supposed to be cute. It was made to engage, like the older audiences would be like, "Aw, that's so cute," and the kids would be like, "Aw, these adorable little micey wiceys," and they would start doing that. So I think that's more pandering towards the audience.
Yeah, I guess so.
Mm.
Overall, though, Jock and Gus, they're awesome. I like them a lot.
I have to say the mice really do make up a big portion of the movie, and they're very enjoyable.
They should rename it The Adventures of Jock and Gus, starring Cinderella.
And now next, we have to talk about Lady Tremaine and Anastasia and Drizella.
Yes, the big antagonists of the film.
And let me just say this. I love Lady Tremaine. She is just the right type of evil. She is subtle. She doesn't have to raise her voice unless, she doesn't yell, but she has a very firm way of doing things. She'll say something softly and she'll be very subtle about it. And then if you try to talk back to her, she'll snap back at you and she'll, stop whatever you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
When she's angry, she doesn't she has this slow scowl across her face and her eyes narrow. And this is where the mood lighting really comes into play in the movie, where we have this villain, and she's made even more sinister by the fact that she's always shaded. You always see Lady Tremaine really in shadows when she's being villainous. And when you first see her, she's sitting in bed and she's stroking her cat, who's named after the devil, Lucifer. And she's just stroking it like Dr. Evil, and she's just like, "Well, why did you do this?" And she's her face is in shadows, and it's just it's a much better implementation of a villain than the Queen in Snow White.
Yeah, definitely, because it's still kind of the same case, in that they're both, the stereotypical evil stepmother. But whereas in Snow White, where the Wicked Queen, basically just shut Snow White away and then tried to attack her from a distance until the very end, you see that Lady Tremaine actively, gets involved with Cinderella and goes out of her way to make sure that she is miserable.
And she's not dumb. She knows the person at the ball that everyone's talking about is familiar. But she never gets a good look. And then she sees Cinderella acting weird afterwards, and she gets an idea in her head, and she's like, "That's the person." She doesn't know how, but she kind of makes this leap of logic, and she understands that Cinderella was at the ball, and so she does everything in her power to stop her from getting the glass slipper.
Yeah, she's the type of villain where, as opposed to the Wicked Queen, who just, tried to outright kill Snow White, in this case, Lady Tremaine tries to destroy Cinderella, mentally and emotionally.
And honestly, a person like a stepmother, having the villainous ambitions of, taking over a kingdom or taking over the world or killing the main protagonist, isn't realistic for the character. It's much more realistic to have them be jealous, and with their jealousy, just make them want to have a miserable life. And this is really shown here, where we get the impression that Lady Tremaine thinks really low of her daughters, but they're her daughters, and she has to love them. So she is incredibly jealous that Cinderella is this perfect person. She's this really kind and generous and stuff, and she hates... Lady Tremaine hates Cinderella because she is so much better than her daughters.
Yeah, and as a result, once Cinderella's father dies and is not around to, see what she does with her stepdaughter, she just, all gloves are off. She comes out, shows her true colors, and, just treats Cinderella like shit from then on. Nothing is holding her back. She realized that, hey, I'm in charge now. I can give my own daughters everything and now make them what Cinderella was and bring her as low as possible.
But you get the impression that she was very much in love with Cinderella's father, though.
Yeah, because I mean, you could make the argument that she just married him for his money, and his influence, and that probably is a big factor in it. But she apparently did love the father enough where unlike other versions of the story that I've read, she doesn't treat Cinderella bad in front of him, or at least never made it clear. And they seem to live a good, happy life up until the father died.
Yeah, I mean, in the short backstory that they give at the beginning of the film, never once do they say that, she treated her badly before the father left the picture, and they never explain what happened to the father. It could have been just a heart attack and he died.
Plus, she probably didn't start off as that bad a person. I mean, I'm just saying because she was married before. And who knows, maybe her first husband was just as big a bastard as she is, but,
And there's a lot that we have to really read into her character from her actions.
Yeah, but overall, like, the fact that, she was just so spiteful and vindictive toward her stepdaughter just because, she, first of all, didn't come from her own loins, and second of all, because she's happened to be, a lot prettier and nicer than her own daughters, just shows what a downright despicable, horrible person she is.
Mm-hmm. So, personally, I think this is the best Disney villain so far that we've actually seen on the show.
I agree, because I know she actually terrified me when I was little, just because I grew up with a strict mother and an equally strict stepmother as well. So always hearing, her raise her voice whenever she gets pissed off always, send a chill through my spine. So.
And the fact that she never lets Cinderella get a word in edgewise. And, a lot of the times she doesn't need to go out of her way to do things. Like when she's talking, Anastasia and Drizella, like they're all freaking out and she's like, girls. And she's like, we'll do this a little bit more subtly. Because they were all freaking out that she was able to go to the ball. But, Lady Tremaine, of course, was just thinking ahead. That's if she finishes her chores.
Mm-hmm.
If is good. As Pain and Panic it once said.
And that leads us to the stepsisters, Anastasia and Drizella. And I guess the best way to describe them is they're spoiled bitches.
Yeah, they're basically like everything that made Lady Tremaine likable is not in them. They're not cunning. They're not witty. They think they're all that, and they're really not. They think they're incredibly pretty, and they're pretty plain looking, and their hairstyle is atrocious. Their sense of fashion is pretty bad, and they have everything they could ever possibly want, and they throw it away. And yet, when Cinderella, acquires it, she takes when she has like the beads and the stuff on the dress. When Cinderella has anything, they're just like, that's mine, even though they throw it away.
Yeah, they're just spoiled rotten through. It is generally infuriating to see them sometimes, just the way that they act. Because I mean, it's just baffling, to see how a person can get that way, and the fact that that they abuse her as such. I mean, in a way, they kind of if this was a normal, good guy, bad guy type deal, they would probably be the henchmen to the big villain, the two grunts that would rather solve things with their fists rather than their smarts.
Yeah. And it's just like they're constantly trying to act as though they're better than Cinderella, and they're completely not.
Yeah, the thing that really baffles me is the fact that they have such, a refined mother, and the fact that, she probably is something of, a lady or a baroness or someone, with some sort of title, and the fact that, she's so subtle in her actions and still manages to come off as sophisticated. In this case, they're just freaking slobs.
Yeah, they're the complete antithesis of Lady Tremaine, and the fact that, like, you see that when she's teaching them to sing and they're practicing, one can't play the flute, and, you know, she's trying and she does it really badly. The other can't sing.
Yeah, and they act so childish. You know, they're always like bickering with each other. You know, fighting over stuff, always talking over each other, bitching about this, and that.
And when things don't go their way, they just call for their mother. It's like they never grew up.
Pretty much. So, yeah, these are basically the siblings that that most people are like either glad that they don't have or have had, and you know, they just want to bitch slap. Trust me, having two sisters of my own, I know it's not easy to get along with. They're not easy to get along with, and there are issues and stuff, but in this case, you know, these are just these are the step siblings you hope to God you never ever get.
Because they're just horrible people. The other two characters that we're going to talk about today are the King and the Duke, and they don't really do too much in the film. The Duke is basically there for comic relief, and, you know, everything doesn't go his way.
Yeah, here's my take on the Duke. I really think that, like, here's the thing, I don't think he's a bad character, because he does add that, you know, sort of comic relief, and, you know, the kind of, what do you call that, the emotional, like, receptacle of the king, you know, is pretty much, he absorbs all of his, you know, emotional outbursts and tantrums and everything. It's just, I really think that they should have left him out and then just substituted the prince in for all of his scenes. Because I think that would have made it a lot, you know, that would have, you know, made those scenes a lot more personable, you know, again, added a lot of character development to the prince, you know, gave him more stuff to do and all that, you know, really involve him with both his father and with the plot. Because the Duke kind of takes away from all that.
But then again, the film showcases that, you know, the king feels that his son is growing farther and farther away from him, and the whole thing, the whole deal with the king is that he wants to have grandkids so he can actually be closer to children.
Which is kind of creepy.
Well, I mean, he's an old man. I think it's every, like, older guy's wish, because, you know, their kids are leaving them and they're lonely, and all he has is this Duke who's pretty comic relief. And honestly, though, I don't think the scenes would be as funny if the Duke would have been out of them. You know, he's quite a funny fellow, and he has that awesome monocle.
Yeah,
I gotta get me one of those.
Well, I mean, I guess you could keep him in, but keep him more, you know, background, you know, as opposed to, like, the prince, or, you know, have him, you know, side with the king, you know, and trying to get the prince to get married. It's just, I think there was, you know, his character, there's a lot you can do with him in terms of, you know, using him to his full potential, which they did in this movie, or sort of, you know, make him a background character. I think things could have, you know, progressed the way they would if they used the prince instead of him. So, in a way, he is essential, but at the same time can be superfluous.
It's all in how you look at it. I just think he's a very fun character. I like the Duke a lot. I like the Duke a lot.
It just always seemed weird to me that he was the one who had to set out and look for Cinderella as opposed to the prince. I mean, you'd think he'd kind of get on that, assuming that he loves this woman and, you know, would probably be the only one to, like, really recognize her on sight.
Well, I think it was more the king's doing than the prince putting him up to it. The king is so, you know, he wants grandchildren so much that he's making the Duke do all his work for him.
Yeah, but in that sense, I do feel bad for the Duke. You know, I just think it would have, you know, been a lot more impactful had the prince been the one to go out and look for Cinderella himself.
Yeah, I mean, the prince could have been a lot more
Proactive.
essential to a lot more proactive in terms of the story, but you know, what we have here isn't bad.
Yeah, I mean, they said not a bad character, and the king's not bad either. It's just, I would have liked to see the prince, do more stuff with them and be more involved instead of them, basically driving the plot just by themselves.
All right, so those are pretty much all the main characters. There's also like Lucifer the cat, Bruno the dog, and the horse, but overall they don't do too much. I mean, yeah, Lucifer serves as the pet to Lady Tremaine, and she attacks the mice, but for the most part, they don't talk, obviously, but for the most part, they just serve as kind of ways for the story to move along.
Pretty much. And then, of course, you have the last character on our list, the one that everyone remembers, the fairy godmother.
And this one is also dressed in blue. Go figure.
Or as I like to call her, the fairy deus ex machina.
Because she shows up after all of this stuff, and she's like, I'm your fairy godmother, I'm here to help you out. And I'm just wondering, where have you been these past few years? You could have helped her out a long time ago.
The fairy godmother is my biggest complaint about this film, in the fact that she shows up for that one scene, grants her the power to go to the ball, and that is it. It's like, bitch, did you not see her getting, abused and made into a servant for the last, probably 10 or so years or whatever? I mean, you show up just to give her some fancy clothes and then leave? I mean, are you her godmother, or are you her
My theory is that
aunt?
she could be very, very, very blind or very poor eyesighted, because we see her and she does everything else first. She gives her a coachman and a coach and whatnot, and then when Cinderella brings it up, she gives her a new outfit.
Yeah, that's the thing with the fairy godmother, is that she's very absent-minded, and I guess it adds to her character, but at the same time, it can get a bit, annoying. Because it's like, Cinderella's standing there in rags. Are you gonna do something about that?
Yeah, no. Rags can't hide her beauty. It's okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, she is likable. The fairy godmother is likable, but at the same time, yeah, I'm just wondering, like, why weren't you there this whole time? Why weren't you helping out Cinderella?
Like, here's the thing. With the talking mice aside, up until the part with the fairy godmother, this was a very realistic, story. Something that you could easily do, like, a stage performance on, or a small budget film on, without the special effects and everything. Like, you could easily make it so that Cinderella, did make her own dress, or, had a dress in reserve, and then went to the ball herself. You could do a lot of stuff, and they have done it, ever after, for example. So, with the fairy godmother, it's like they just threw her in there just to make it whimsical and magical.
There was an alternate scene near the ending that was cut from the film, though, that would have incorporated the fairy godmother. Mm-hmm. It was actually incorporated later into Birth by Sleep, Kingdom Hearts. Mm-hmm. I have not played Birth by Sleep yet, but I mean, from what it appears, it basically would have been like the prince embraces her even though she's in rags. Ian sees her and is just like, I don't really care, and then the fairy godmother appears and restores the ball gown.
See, I would have liked to have seen that, since it does happen in the book. But at the same time, I do agree that they, on them cutting it, because it does kind of needlessly pad out the ending. So.
I mean, what we have here is enjoyable, and the fairy godmother plot hole aside, I think this is a very solid animated film. It's like I said, it's Snow White but done better. But what the really enjoyable part of this film is the music. This is the first film where I feel that every single song works. Every single song is catchy. It helps move the film along and could exist as its own on a soundtrack. And this is the first soundtrack that they use Tin Pan Alley to write the songs. And they're going to use it later on in Disney Life Cycle. But seriously, every single song in this movie really works. The first one is the title song, Cinderella. And unlike a lot of the previous openings where a chorus would, bring it in, this works a little bit better because you can actually hear the individual singers. It's not like a whole mishmash of people singing together. And I always felt that they overpowered their microphones too much when they were singing these choral songs.
Yeah, because unlike films like Bambi, where it opens up with some random,
Love is a Song or whatever that is.
Stuff that songs that really don't go with the movie. In this case, everything fits.
Mm-hmm. So we have the opening choral thing, and it's just like it's introducing us to Cinderella, what it's going to be about, and then we get the backstory on her. And so that's a great introduction to this character. The next one is A Dream is a Wish Your Heart Makes, and that's sung by Cinderella herself. And we get to see that, like I said, she is an amazing singer. Eileen Woods is really good, and the song is very memorable. It's basically telling us that, if you wish hard enough and you put all your effort into something, then it will come true.
Mm-hmm.
And this, actually, I think it makes much more sense than when you wish upon a star, in the fact that it's more proactive.
Yeah, definitely. And also it shows, Cinderella's positive outlook on life despite the situation that she's in. And,
Mm-hmm.
the fact that, no matter what goes on, no matter how bad things get, she will always, hold on to her dreams and always continue wishing.
And it's like, it doesn't say that it will always come true, but it's saying if you work for it, it most likely will. But you got to have a positive attitude, and if it doesn't come true, then you have to keep positive. And I think keep having your dreams. Cinderella herself says that, her dreams may just be dreams, but they can't be taken away. Those are the only things that her step siblings can't take away from her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very upbeat song, one that I personally like a whole lot.
The next one is "Oh Sing Sweet Nightingale," and that's the one where Drizella completely fails at singing, and she gets hit by the flute, and it's both a funny song, and then it has great juxtaposition where we see Cinderella singing the same song, and it's very beautiful, and she's just like, the whole bubble mirage acid trip sequence takes place, where she's dreaming about, like, having a better life, and she's like, it's really reflected in her song, where she's like singing and drifting away into another world, into her happy place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a really, really pretty song, and and she's sort of like is the nightingale singing.
Mm-hmm. Like I said, every single song in this has purpose, and it's not really padding. Next is the work song with the mice as they're making the dress, and this is both cute and a good song. I think it's very catchy, it's very upbeat, and who hasn't heard this? I mean, Cinderella, Cinderella, da 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 da. It's one of those Disney classics.
Yeah, it does, like you said, it does move the plot along. I mean, it starts off with the mice being very, sad about Cinderella not being able to finish her dress, and, how she's not going to be able to go to the ball, and then they're like, hey, wait, we can make the dress, and then, the whole progression as they slowly make each piece, and, and how they eventually finish it, make it to this, beautiful, beautiful dress.
Mm-hmm. And one thing to note here is that this this soundtrack, the soundtrack for Cinderella, was the first soundtrack to have its songs published and copyrighted by the Walt Disney Music Company. Especially because movie soundtracks at the time weren't very marketable. They were just like sold off to different, studios for sheet music. But here, this is a full soundtrack that really warranted publication because of how great it was.
Yeah, and there's even certain songs were even re-sung by famous musical artists like Perry Como and the Fontaine Sisters.
Mm-hmm.
And later on, even more people would go on to remaster some of the songs, like the Disney Channel.
Mm-hmm.
Ugh.
Yeah. But
that aside,
the next song is Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo, and this is the premiere song of the film. This is the song that everyone remembers, whether or not you remember everything else in the film. You remember Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo. Because it just has like this really clever wordplay, Salakadoola, Mythicaboola. It takes these words that mean something, and it transforms them a little bit. You add a little bit to the end of it, and it's clever wordplay. It's a mystical like spell, but it works as a song.
Kind of reminds me of like supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, and the fact that it's basically nonsense, but it's fun nonsense.
It's nonsense that's created out of actual words that people, used. Like, Alaka was like, it reminds me of like abracadabra and stuff like that, like the magical words like magicians would use.
Mm-hmm.
So it's taking stuff that was established in people's minds, twisting it around a little bit, and making it into a really catchy song.
And it definitely works in that aspect. I mean, everyone knows Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo. And even, and it's just fun to sing. I mean, it's cool to imagine yourself with a wand and just, pretending to, like, turn objects into different objects. And, it's just plain fun. I love it.
And then the next one is So This Is Love. And this is the song that is sung during the ballroom scene with Cinderella and Prince Charming. Between Cinderella and Prince Charming. And honestly, I think it does a great job of establishing that they're not fully in love. I mean, the title says So This Is Love, but it's just them kind of feeling each other out and wondering, like, are you the right person for me? You strike me as very, very attractive. I'm very attracted to you for some reason. There's something happening. Is this love?
I think they're sort of like both discovering it and coming to the conclusion that, hey, I'm feeling all light as a feather, and my face is flushed, my heart's beating so fast. This must be love.
And so I think it works as a great sequence to establish that these characters are falling in love and why they're falling in love. I mean, it's not perfect. It's still kind of a Disney cliche, they're falling in love at first sight. But it does do a pretty good job of trying to explain what they're feeling and why they're feeling it.
And also, I think this is sort of like the thing that both of them are waiting for. Because, like, Cinderella always dreamed of, something bigger.
And the prince seemed like he was always swamped with people. It seems like he wanted something new and different.
Yeah, like he was, like, the reason he didn't seek out anyone is that he was waiting for the one. And this person seems to be the one. And I personally think it's a very romantic song.
I think it's a very well-sung song. I think it's romantic, and I think it really fits the scene well.
Yeah. I would
love
to dance with a prince to that song.
And then the film ends on a reprise of A Dream Is a Wish Your Heart Makes, which is a perfect bookend to the film.
Yeah, it pretty much, it starts, because the song, it started off with Cinderella, the start of her day before everything happened, and it ends with, like, hey, I made a wish and it came true. So it pretty much comes full circle.
But, like, unlike a little bit of the message in Pinocchio that could be misconstrued a little bit. This shows Cinderella working hard for what she had to do for her dreams, and that is clearly represented in A Dream Is a Wish Your Heart Makes. And so I think it serves as a much better bookend in the fact that the song really represents the film instead of, showcasing a message that was not intended for the film.
Well, I wouldn't say she worked hard, because, again, she got handed a lot of stuff. But the fact that, she kept on believing, and,
She kept on pushing forward. She had a lot of willpower, she had a lot of determination, and when she couldn't do something, she turned to her friends and her helpers to give her a little boost. I mean, she's not perfect. She's not she doesn't do everything, but at the same time, I'd say the fact that she didn't give up and the fact that she kept pushing on is a very admirable trait.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, I mean, you can make the argument that it's kind of like a subtle, sort of religious tone a bit, saying that if you stay faithful, good things will come to you. But for the most part, I think it does work for this film.
Now, what do you think of the film overall?
I love it. Like I said, this is one of my favorites from when I was little, and it still is. I mean, true, that's kind of stereotypically girly of me, but I always, every girl, when they fantasize about, how they meet their Prince Charming and, how they would look in a beautiful ball gown and everything, I mean, call me a sap, or, for that kind of romantic stuff, but it really speaks true to me, and I love it a lot.
I think this is a Disney classic through and through. I think there are elements that really don't work when viewed. I think there are elements that don't work when viewed from retroactively, like we're doing here. But at the same time, overall, it is a very good film. It took Snow White, the formula, the characters, and gave it a new tone. It really gave much more character development, especially for the side characters. Mm-hmm. And it had a great structure. The music received a major overhaul as well, and it showed that Disney was making, waves. It was going leaps and bounds better with each new film, and they were learning what worked and what didn't work. And I think this film definitely showcases, what this, what Disney philosophy was all about. I mean, Disney hadn't really had too much of a huge hit until this film's release. And this just put the Disney studio back on the map.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this definitely a timeless classic. Now let's see how we could fuck it all up.
Well, guys, there is not one, but 2 sequels to Cinderella.
Yes, and like we said, we'll be reviewing those 2 as well, and unfortunately, we have our next film that we're reviewing is Cinderella 2.
Electric Boogaloo. And I've seen this film. I don't remember much about it, and I probably shouldn't. I'm gonna need a lot of Pan-Galactic Gargle Blaster after this.
Yeah, if you ever want an example of, of just what a horrible mistake all those Disney sequels of the 2000 era was, I mean, look at this film. Yeah, so next time we shall be watching Cinderella 2, Dreams Come True. Oh,
Ooh.
goody.
So get ready, guys. 1950 started off great. Next week won't be so great.
Yeah.
Anyway, this has been the Disney debate for this week. I am Zenith Rule, and this is my partner in crime, Kat Mac. If you want to leave us any comments, criticisms, concerns, or suggestions, or Disney movie suggestions that Disney has distributed but isn't part of the main canon, by all means, comment and by all means reach us at zenithrule.blip.tv. Or if you don't want to do that, you can always follow us at twitter.com/zenithrule and twitter.com/EphraimTRabbit. Or if you think Twitter is for squares like pants, you can follow us at Facebook at facebook.com/zenithrule and facebook.com/catmac. Or you can follow our fan page at facebook.com/thedisneydebate, and we have all the episodes posted up there.
In the meantime, I am Kat Mac /EphraimTRabbit/CatTCritic.
And I am Zenith Rule. We'll be seeing you.
At TTFN. Ta-ta for now.
Thank you for watching The Media Meltdown. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more awesome videos. And if you like what you see, show your support on the Patreon page at patreon.com/Media Meltdown. See you all next time on The Media Meltdown.